Hello, my name is Laura Vanderhoof. Thank you for joining this presentation. This presentation is titled Youthful Offenders Gain Pro-Social Skills Through Restorative Justice Interventions. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a social worker. I have my bachelor's in social work, my master's in social work, and my doctorates in social work. I bring nearly 30 years of experience, and my experiences have covered a variety of areas in the field of mental health, child welfare, sexual abuse, working with those that have been victimized and those that are the offenders, along with working in the field of human trafficking and restorative justice practices. I'm also a Kansas State Supreme Court approved mediator for individuals needing conflict mediation. I look forward to spending some time talking about the work that I've been doing. This is a 2-year study, and we're going to look at the objectives here of this presentation. We'll review how youth gained pro-social skills as a result of the intervention, examine the case studies and data gathering instruments, discuss the structure for conflict mediation with youthful offenders and their victims. To start with, let's talk about some of the background on how this research came to be. There was a group of parents and community members that came together to find a better solution for how youth who are first-time offenders, non-person felony offenses, and how they could be supported. The idea of using restorative justice principles was explored along with conflict mediation interventions. Individuals were trained and equipped, community correction officers, and community correction partners, along with the judges, the probation officers, school administration, law enforcement staff, and concerned citizens were trained and provided resources for how to think and respond to youthful offenders through a restorative justice lens. The use of restorative justice in conflict mediation practices, along with collecting pre and post test information to learn if restorative justice and conflict mediation interventions do in fact bring about pro-social skills, was examined over a 2-year period. IRB was followed. Conflict mediators were trained in working with the participants in gaining their permission to participate in the study and complete the pre and post test tools. The sample size of the participants in the 2-year study was small due to few referrals. In addition, some facilitators not being comfortable with collecting the data. As a result, the data cannot be generalized, but the process offers potential for alternative practices that can support youth, families, and the community. One goal of this research is to understand how youth internalize positive change in behavior. The various stakeholders, youth, the parents, community members, and the legal system will gain alternative avenues that support long-term youth development as they develop pro-social skills. This can be helpful also to justice practitioners working in organizations that try to help offenders following an offense. Restorative justice intervention can directly contribute to the youth's ownership of behavior and harm to others, and the community results in youth gaining pro-social behaviors. As youth discover new skills through restorative justice interventions, they learn how to more appropriately respond to situations and avoid reoffending behavior in the future. Juvenile delinquency continues to be a concern for parents, schools, communities, and various systems such as the criminal justice system, behavioral health, child welfare, and education, to name a few, that collaborate to support, rehabilitate, and develop healthy, productive young adults. One approach that many consider and others yet question is its effectiveness is restorative justice, the restorative justice approaches to juvenile criminal matters. Examining how restorative justice intervention can directly contribute to the youth's ownership of behavior and harm to others and the community, resulting in youth gaining pro-social behaviors. As youth discover new skills through restorative justice interventions, they learn how to more appropriately respond to various stressful, pressured, or unhealthy situations and avoid reoffending behavior in the future. There is room at the table for alternative approaches to be considered, as youth and their families should not be boxed into a one-size-fits-all. A goal of this research was to understand how youth internalize positive change in behavior. The various stakeholders, the youth, parents, community members, and the legal system will gain an alternative avenue that supports youth long-term in developing pro-social skills. This can be helpful also to justice practitioners working in organizations that try to help offenders following an offense. One thing that should be noted is that the families that were being impacted the most were the folks that were at the table to help develop what kind of approach should be used in the community. Now we're going to turn our attention to some definitions. Some of the terminology we'll use going through the rest of this time is restorative justice. And Zaire noted that restorative justice framework is centered around the concept that individuals and relationships are the foci of criminal behavior and not simply the mere act of breaking the law. The law and statutes are in fact not ignored and are enforced through the criminal justice system, but through a restorative justice lens. Practitioners, offenders, and community members provide a venue for restoring relationships, taking responsibility, and learning more effective behavior when one is faced with challenges or unhealthy responses. Turning our attention to the conflict mediation process, there seems to be a certain level of accountability afforded during the offender-victim reconciliation process. Through experience, the victim is granted the space, time, and value to offer their perspective of the harm and the impact this harm and violation has had. The victim is empowered to have a voice to bring about justice, and in turn, the offender is able to listen, understand, and gain insight into how the violation impacted their victim. In the end, the offender is held responsible to the individual that was harmed, as well as the larger community. The mediation process includes the following: pre-meetings, which are held individually with the victim and their support people, which are many times their caregivers, their guardians, parents. Sometimes it's an outside person, not connected as a guardian. It's who the individual chooses to bring as their support person. And both the victim and the offender have these individual meetings to understand what brought their case to the services and to understand the process of conflict mediation through a restorative justice lens. Then once both parties agree to participate in the mediation process, we will bring all the parties together and we'll work through the process, including introductions and confidentiality, reminding everyone that this is a voluntary process, establish ground rules that everyone can agree upon, and to maintain safety. Once introductions have happened, then opening statements are held. And these opening statements are heard by not just the offender, but also the victim. And typically the victim's voice is heard first, and to allow for that empowerment along the way. And so each person tells what's happened and what happened to bring them to services. Once we move towards understanding what brought them to the eyes of an intervention, the issues are then identified through the use of non-judgmental language and the ability to fully understand what happened and what we then move towards is problem solving and negotiation for how the offender can take responsibility and reestablish themselves back into society, that the person or group or entity that was victimized also feels that justice can take place through the agreement. And then the agreement is what each party will do and take responsibility for in how they've created harm for the offender and what the victim might need from the offender. And so once that process is complete, then there's some other follow-up that's done to ensure that the offender has followed through on the agreement. So these processes are all facilitated by a trained facilitator in restorative justice and conflict mediation practices. Another term listed is pro-social behavior. Pro-social behaviors are behaviors that benefit others, such as assisting others with no intention for a reward. A selfish action, carrying out how one impacts another person. Furthermore, this is about our interpersonal connections and how we interact with each other. Latimer and partners reviewed and did an analysis of research studies from over a 25-year period and found that overall restorative justice program outcomes found that offenders were less likely to reoffend and overall more successful long-term as opposed to traditional criminal justice interventions. Also, Gabe found that was not considered in the criminal justice process, but heavily relied on within the restorative justice practices. The opportunity for the offender to not only take responsibility, but to gain skills to manage one's behavior, attitudes, and actions is critical for productivity and engagement in society. We're now going to turn our attention to theoretical underpinnings, and we have several listed that I'm going to unpack for us today. First, the strengths perspective, which many of you are probably familiar with, but just to make sure we have common terminology going forward, the strengths perspective emphasizes affirming and working with the client's strengths and resources available in their environments. This perspective focuses on the client's personal assets along with their environmental resources, rather than on their pathology and limitations. It also seeks to acknowledge clients' expertise regarding their own lives and to focus on their resiliency and capacities to survive and to confront seemingly overwhelming obstacles. Next, moving to the person and environment fit, also considered the ecological perspective or ecosystem perspective. This examines the exchange between individual, families, groups, and the community with their environment, depending on who the client system is. This perspective is useful for social work practitioners because it encourages matching people as much as possible with their environments, striving to increase the fit between human needs and the environment, which can lead to social workers are having an ability to influence the client's social and physical environment to better address human needs. The solution focus brings a concrete change and utilizes one's resources and strengths to reach the goals. Also, the cognitive behavioral perspective theory focuses on psychological interventions to address psychological behavior that are a result in part from thinking that is not helpful, learn patterns of behavior that are not helpful, or the need to gain more effective coping skills to address psychological issues. This intervention focuses on gaining understanding of one's distorted thinking and moving them to a place of reality, gaining knowledge around behavior and our motivations, and developing coping skills to address challenges. A strength this intervention provides is an alternative avenue for individuals faced with legal charges to take responsibility for their actions while honoring the client's culture. The restorative justice approach positions itself through helping individuals find strengths, the strengths perspective, for themselves and utilizing their support system, that person and environment ecological perspective. As one considers the current political and environmental structures, the restorative justice approach yields for the offender, the victim, the legal system, and the community an alternative strategy with tangible and introspective outcomes of taking responsibility for the crime, the harm done, and reestablishing a healthier relationship with the person harmed and the larger society. In addition, the solution-focused theory and cognitive behavioral theory are relied on to assist you through the conflict mediation process. There are many factors which cannot be ignored as we unpack the restorative justice process. This process is not simply to close a court case, but rather strengthen individuals, the internal and external, and relationships that are at each level, be it the micro, the meso, and the macro level. The referral system is typically the court system, but not limited to this, as the educational system experiences various situations in which harm and rules have been violated and offenders need to be restored back into the community. A unique factor that the restorative justice process relies on are individuals to facilitate the mediation process through individuals usually who are volunteers who are outside of the legal system. The individuals directly involved and impacted by the crime are those who are directly involved in the process and guide the outcome rather than the judge or the attorney. The offender-victim mediation is engaged and in an active process for all parties, not merely an event with an outcome done to the offender. Another benefit for the offender is the financial costs associated with the process through offender-victim mediation, especially for low-income participants who were the focus of bringing this type of intervention to the community. The offender in this situation typically pays a cost of about $25, and this cost covers the administrative expenses for the organization. And then there may be additional restitution that is agreed upon through the mediation process. In addition to the financial costs, the time element is shorter, with typically 2 meetings that participants attend with a phone call follow-up with that facilitator who initiated the initial meeting. Gabe found that victims of crime voices are rarely considered in the criminal justice arena. This process allows for the victim's voice to be heard and for the harm that was done to be restored back into the community directly with those that they harmed. We're going to change gears and look at a few case studies. I've changed the names and the situations to protect the identity of each participant. First, we'll look at case number 1. Jared was found to be intoxicated and had been in a fight with a peer. Jared engaged in the process and attended a substance abuse and mental health evaluation as part of the intervention. He was depressed and angry, he reported. He was able to take responsibility through the process for his actions, through taking and writing an apology letter, taking the apology letter to those that he harmed, meeting with law enforcement to have a better understanding for where he is coming from and the role that law enforcement have in the community. He re-enrolled in a high school program that met his needs and was able to support him. He found new outlets for when he feels angry that were healthy, that were productive, rather than hurting other people. Case number 2, we'll name Sarah. Sarah stole from a local retail store and was caught and charged with theft. Through the intervention process, Sarah wrote and delivered an apology letter to the store and to the law enforcement officer that had to arrest her. She met with each of these people one-on-one to talk about what had happened and how things have changed in her life for the better. She also developed a financial plan with her parents, as she also sought out a teacher to become her mentor. She had not had a mentor in her life, but she was able to identify one person that she could have outside of her family unit to support her when things were challenging, when things were needed to just have an outside view to talk through what she was going through. She also developed strategies that she can turn to now when she is feeling depressed. She returned the stolen property and she paid restitution at a fine of $50 back to the store. Case number 3, we'll name Kelly. Kelly stole from a local store, wrote an apology letter, and has gained new skills. And the new skills that she found were addressing the peer pressure she had felt when she was taken and with her friends and forced, at least she felt forced, into stealing at the local store. Now today, she's able to encourage her peers, those that she sees being bullied or pressured, not to fall into the same situation that she came into. And she talks with her peers, with her friends, about how to make healthy decisions that have a better impact on their lives based on the experience she had. Those stories are just a little bit of what has happened. What we know from the community corrections is that the youth are not reoffending. They're tracking these youth long-term and they're finding success. And they're attributing that in part to this intervention, which is a positive step to offer if you're considering using restorative justice, conflict mediation interventions in the work with youth. Next, I'm going to turn our attention before I look at some of the data outcome, but look at the instrument. And so I'm going to go over the questions that were asked of the participants. And the first question has an overarching, and then there's multiple questions under it that they answer. And they rate themselves of how effective or ineffective they believe the process was. And they do it at a pre and a post time. So before they entered into services and then after completing the process. And they rated on a very effective, effective, neither effective nor ineffective, ineffective, very ineffective, or not applicable for the first series of questions. The first question, I believe participating in the process will prevent me from committing another offense. I will learn, grow, and mature. I believe that restitution will help me take responsibility for my actions. The next question also is a rating, and this is about their future. So the question is, do you believe that achieving the following outcomes for your future, for yourself and your future, will they be effective, ineffective, very ineffective? So preventing me from committing another crime in the future is the question, and they rate themselves. The next question is, I understand the impact of my behavior and its consequences, and I demonstrate this by, and they select the best responses. Take responsibility for my actions, avoid situations that are illegal or create harm to others. I have made no changes. I have continued to engage in harmful, illegal behaviors, and they select the best responses. The next question, I have decided to participate in the process, and they are able to talk about for a variety of how they see. And there are prompts that the facilitator can offer if they're not sure why they decided to participate. And some of those prompts are to take responsibility for my actions, to apologize, to restore the relationship to those I harmed, or something else that they want to fill in. The next question, I anticipate that the program will help me with how I think, how I act, how I respond to others, how I feel, or any other comments they want to add there. The next question, I value and understand the purpose of rules and laws now, and they can select any of the following. Take responsibility for my actions, avoid situations that are illegal or create harm to others. I have made no changes. I continue to engage in harmful, illegal behaviors. The next question is, today when I become angry, I respond by, and they can select from the following. Seek out support to talk to another person, stop and reflect before responding. If they select that one, then we ask them to tell us what activities they engage in. Other options they have, engage in positive outlets, hit someone or something, commit harm to others. The next question, what is your attitude towards your victim now? Very positive, positive, neutral, negative, or very negative. Question 9 is, if you have a conflict in the future, what skills will you use? And they have options to select, and they can select as many as apply. Meet with the victim and work out the conflict, apologize, find someone to help me think of more effective options, ignore the situation, confront the situation through violence or illegal activity. And the last two questions, since your referral to the program, have your attitudes about committing crime changed, yes or no? And if they say yes, we ask them to elaborate on that. And then the last question is an open-ended, if there was anything else that they would like to share about their situation. So in total, there's a little over 10 prompts that they are asked to complete. And now I'd like to turn our attention to some of the responses that we received. So the first one that I'm showing is, did the services prevent me from committing another offense in the future? And they rated this as very effective or effective. Another question. I understand the impact of my behavior and its consequences, and I just demonstrate this by, and they select what the best responses are. And we see take responsibility, avoid situations that are illegal or create harm to others. Some open-ended responses to this question. I have decided to participate in the program to restore the relationship to those harmed, help me learn from my mistakes, and help me stay away from horrible situations and avoid stupid decisions. Help me with the situation to think about the future. Those are pretty genuine responses that the youth have offered. Another open-ended question. I anticipate that the program will help me with how I respond to others, how I feel about myself, how I act and feel, and how I act. Another question. I value and understand the purpose of rules and laws now, and they selected take responsibility for my actions, avoid situations that are illegal or create harm to others. That's pretty significant that they are taking responsibility and they've made changes that they've identified. Today, when I become angry, I respond by seeking out support, to talk to a support person, stop and reflect before responding, engage in positive outlets, hit something or someone. This one, I know the individual had selected the hit someone, something else, not someone, by using a punching bag and a pillow. So that would be what we would consider a healthy, more productive response to their emotions. If you have conflict in the future, what skills will you use? Meet with the victim and work out the conflict, apologize, find someone to help me think of more effective options. I think that's really important to recognize that the youth are finding that it's helpful to talk through and get some guidance from others, and they want to work with through the situation. Rate how effective or ineffective you believe participating in the process will be in assisting you in the following outcomes: effective and very effective. So they're very hopeful. I will learn, grow, and mature, effective and very effective through the process. And here are the resources. We can make sure that these are available to you when you review the slide deck later. Really appreciate your attention to this. I know we're going to move into a question and answer time, and I look forward to talking with you further about all of this work. Thank you.